For 6 years, a little girl secretly shared half of her lunch with a lonely boy everyone else ignored. One morning, he disappeared without a single goodbye. 20 years later, when she was about to lose everything she had left, a stranger walked into her life, carrying a promise she never expected. Before we continue, here's a small request. If you're enjoying this story, please like, follow, and subscribe to stay connected and never miss a new story. The lunch that changed two lives forever. Emma Brooks grew up in the aging neighborhood of Ashford Heights, where every cracked sidewalk held another story of families trying to survive. Her mother worked 2 jobs. Her father had passed away when she was only 7, and every dollar in their tiny apartment had a purpose before it was ever earned. Even so, Emma's mother never let her leave for school without packing a simple lunch. Some days it was only a peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and a small bottle of water, but to Emma it was enough. At 11 years old, she believed kindness cost nothing, even when food did. Every morning, she walked the same route to school, passing an abandoned train station hidden behind rusted fencing and overgrown weeds. Most people hurried past without looking. They had learned to ignore the forgotten places of the city. Emma had not. One rainy morning, she noticed a boy sitting beneath the broken platform roof. He couldn't have been much older than her. His clothes were too big, his shoes were falling apart, and his eyes carried the kind of fear no child should ever know. He never asked anyone for help. He simply watched the world pass him by. Emma walked past him that first day, but couldn't stop thinking about his empty stare. The next morning, she quietly placed half of her lunch beside him before continuing toward school. She said nothing. The boy waited until she disappeared around the corner before touching the food. The following day, she did it again. Soon it became a routine neither of them questioned. Weeks became months. Months became years. She eventually learned his name was Ethan Cole after noticing it written inside an old library book he carried everywhere. It was the only thing he owned that connected him to a happier life. Ethan had lost both parents in an accident and slipped through every crack in the system. Shelters were overcrowded. Foster homes never lasted. Eventually, he found the abandoned station safer than the people who promised to help him. Emma never asked for his story. She simply shared what she had. During winter, she brought an extra pair of gloves her mother thought she had misplaced. During summer, she slipped him bottled water without letting anyone notice. Sometimes they exchanged only a few words. Sometimes they sat in complete silence while trains thundered past on distant tracks. Emma never realized she had become the only person Ethan trusted. At school, her classmates laughed whenever they saw her walking toward the station. They called Ethan a street kid and warned her to stay away. Emma ignored every cruel word. At home, her mother noticed food disappearing faster than usual. One evening, she quietly placed 2 sandwiches into Emma's lunchbox instead of one. She never asked why. Mothers often understand kindness before it is explained. By the time Emma turned 17, Ethan had grown taller and stronger. He spent his evenings reading books rescued from dumpsters and teaching himself mathematics using discarded school notebooks. He dreamed of escaping poverty, even though he had no idea how. Emma believed he would find a way. Then everything changed. One Monday morning, construction crews arrived before sunrise. The abandoned station was surrounded by fences and heavy machinery. Workers cleared every corner before beginning demolition. Emma searched desperately for Ethan, but he was gone. A foreman simply told her the homeless boy had disappeared before the police arrived. She searched nearby streets for weeks. Every afternoon, she walked farther hoping to see his familiar face. No one had answers. Eventually, life forced her forward, but every time she packed a lunch, she remembered the boy who had once waited beneath the broken roof. The years moved faster than Emma ever imagined. After graduating from high school, she attended a local college while working evenings at a grocery store to help support her mother. Life never became easy. Medical bills slowly consumed their savings after her mother was diagnosed with heart disease. Emma eventually married, hoping to build a stable future, but the marriage collapsed under financial pressure and constant disagreements. With a young son named Noah depending on her, she returned to the small family home she had grown up in. She worked long hours as an elementary school teacher, spending every spare dollar on medicine, groceries, and keeping a roof over their heads. When her mother passed away a few years later, Emma felt as though the last piece of her childhood had disappeared. The house that once echoed with laughter became painfully quiet. Repairs were postponed, utility bills piled higher each month, and loan payments became impossible to manage. One afternoon, a foreclosure notice arrived in the mail. The bank planned to auction her home within weeks. Emma folded the letter and placed it inside a kitchen drawer, determined not to let Noah see her crying. She continued going to work every morning with a smile that hid her fear. A few days later, a flyer announced that a charitable foundation was hosting a town meeting to discuss restoring neglected neighborhoods. Emma attended with little hope, believing it would be another event filled with promises that would never be kept. The auditorium was crowded with residents eager for answers. When the keynote speaker stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. He spoke with confidence about rebuilding communities, supporting struggling families, and creating opportunities for children who had been forgotten. When the audience was invited to ask questions, Emma stood. Her voice was calm, but carried years of disappointment. "Why invest here?" she asked. "Most people gave up on this neighborhood long ago." The man paused before answering. "Because this neighborhood saved my life," he said. "When I was a homeless child, one person treated me like I mattered. Every school morning she shared her lunch with me, even when she barely had enough herself. She never asked for anything in return. That simple act taught me that kindness can become someone's reason to keep believing in tomorrow." Then his eyes found Emma. Time seemed to stop. He smiled with quiet disbelief before softly saying, "Emma." She recognized him immediately. Though dressed in a tailored suit instead of worn-out clothes, the kindness in his eyes had never changed. Ethan walked down from the stage, and the audience watched in silence as the two old friends embraced after 2 decades apart. Later that evening, they shared dinner and filled the missing years with stories. Ethan explained that after leaving the train station, he had entered a youth shelter, earned scholarships through relentless study, graduated from college, and eventually founded a successful construction company dedicated to rebuilding forgotten communities. Emma spoke honestly about losing her mother, raising Noah alone, and struggling to keep her home. She never mentioned the foreclosure notice, believing it was her burden to carry. Ethan noticed the exhaustion she tried to hide. A few days later, he quietly learned the truth through public property records. Without telling Emma, he contacted the bank and paid every overdue balance, stopping the foreclosure before the deadline passed. When they met again, Emma finally admitted she was terrified of losing her home. Ethan smiled gently and told her she no longer had to carry that fear alone. At first, she refused to accept such generosity, but Ethan reminded her that years earlier she had never asked whether he deserved her kindness. She had simply chosen compassion. "This isn't repayment," he said. "It's the chance to pass forward what you taught me." Their friendship slowly grew into something deeper. Ethan became part of Noah's everyday life, helping with homework, attending baseball games, and fixing the old house one weekend at a time. There were no grand promises, only small acts of consistency that slowly rebuilt trust. Nearly a year later, Ethan invited Emma to the site where the abandoned train station had once stood. In its place was a beautiful community learning center offering free tutoring, meals, and career programs for children and families facing hardship. Standing where their story had begun, Ethan asked Emma to spend the rest of her life with him. With tears in her eyes, she accepted. They married the following spring in a small ceremony surrounded by neighbors, friends, and children whose lives had already been changed by the learning center. Emma continued teaching. Ethan continued building places that offered hope instead of despair. Every morning before leaving for work, Emma still packed one extra lunch. She and Ethan quietly placed it in the learning center's community refrigerator for anyone who needed it. Neither of them ever forgot that the smallest act of kindness can echo across decades, changing not only one life, but generations that follow. True kindness never asks for recognition or reward. Even the smallest act of compassion can change a life forever, and the good we do today often returns in ways we could never imagine. Emma never expected half a sandwich to rewrite two futures. Yet every time another child opened the community refrigerator and found a meal waiting inside, she smiled, knowing that kindness never truly ends. It simply finds a new pair of hands to carry it forward. This is the end of the story.